Okay, after a 4-year break, yes, an extended 4-year break, we're returning to our Kings and Queens of England playlist, yes. And today we're looking at King John's successor, where we left it, with King John dying just after Magna Carta. Henry III, yes, the boy king when he comes to the throne at the age of 9. He reigns for 56 years. It's a long time. He's one of the few kings that doesn't have a mistress and any bastard children, any illegitimate children. All his children are legitimate with his wife Eleanor of Provence. He's an exceptionally pious man. He's a warrior king as well, with some mixed reviews on his battlefield performance, we should say. Some wins, some losses, but he's also exceptionally pious. He rebuilds Westminster Abbey and rebuilds the tomb of Edward the Confessor, names his eldest son after Edward the Confessor, names his second eldest son after Edmund Ironside. So there you go, he really likes the old Saxon Danish kings of old, wants to prove that this current French lineage is linked to the Saxons and the Danes before, which they are, but to really cement that with the English people. Good move, you would think. Anyway, let's get on to the key points of his reign, and there's quite a lot of warfare in here and quite a lot of dysfunction. 56 years on the throne, you think he's very popular. He really wasn't at times. There was several revolts, 2 barons' wars, disastrous war with France, and quite a bit of hacking and stabbing and death on the battlefield, but no attempted assassination and no dethronement fully, which is weird, very weird, considering all the carnage that the 56 years of his reign meted out. Now, he's 9 when he takes over in 1216, so there's a regency put in place, and the head regent is William Marshal, I Earl of Pembroke. He's in charge of all the nobles and the Parliament, and he's governing in the king's stead until he reaches the age of majority. He's in charge until 1219, when he's replaced by Hubert de Burgh. From 1219 until 1227, the country is stable. There is no conflict. The nobles seem to know what they're doing. The nobles don't want war all the time. The country's basically bankrupt from the First Barons' War, which in the early part of his reign, which we'll look at, is still ongoing when he is literally a boy. When he is crowned very quickly at Winchester Cathedral, because he's based in Winchester, they rush him there, get him crowned as quickly as possible to legitimise him, and the Pope legitimises him as well, because the rebels are backing Prince Louis, the Dauphin of France, who is a relation of Henry III. They want him to be king, and that weakens the rebels' position. There are 2 more key battles in the First Barons' War that need to be won, and they are at Lincoln and at Sandwich, and they both result in the victories for Henry's forces led by William Marshal, the warrior knight. Then there is peace, until, obviously, 3 years after Hubert de Burgh has relinquished the reins of the regency. Henry takes over as a mature adult at the age of 20 and is now ruling by himself. He doesn't really take the advice of Parliament so well and rules with favourites. His favourite nobles get appointed to key positions like Chancellor and Marshal of England and various other bits and pieces, which proves problematic later on. And he decides to invade France in 1230. Doesn't go very well, and they very, very quickly withdraw back to England. There's no major battles, but it's a dysfunctional invasion of mainland France. Doesn't go very well, and sows the seed for further conflict for the next 37 years. Basically, the next 37 years is almost constant conflict in England and abroad. They return to England defeated, disorganised, dysfunction, which then 2 years later leads to a revolt by William Marshal's eldest son, Richard, the second Earl of Pembroke, in 1232. Now, the church quickly intercedes, and there is quickly a ceasefire, and the revolt is put down without too much violence, but it is showing that there's a growing discontent at home, which is an ongoing issue that will result in a far bigger conflict at the end of Henry's reign. To distract from home, he invades France again. In the Battle of Taillebourg in 1242, it ends in an embarrassing defeat. The French army destroys the English army on the field. It's a humiliating defeat, and Henry has to return home defeated for a second time on the continent. Basically, these wars with France are designed to regain Normandy, Gascony, and Anjou back to the English crown, because they were part of the Angevin Empire, which his grandfather, uncle, and father ruled over until they didn't, when King John had lost it all, basically, which led to the First Barons' War starting with the loss of lands and income from France. This leads to rising discontent, but before the discontent really explodes, the Statute of Jewry is implemented. Now, these are anti-Semitic laws designed to make the lives of Jews a bit more difficult. Not outright expulsion, not outright seizure of property, but taxes are raised. They're restricted in what professions they can do, which ultimately leads them to becoming jewelers and jewel merchants, so working with gold and silver and jewellery. That's where the word jewellery comes from. They are restricted to certain specific trades. Their lives are a bit more restricted than the normal citizen. So they have higher taxes and they're limited in where they can work. They've got to wear the yellow Star of David. You'll see where this is going, can't you? Now, whether they are fully implemented laws or not, we don't fully know. We know that his son Edward I implements much harsher measures against the Jews of England, and it leads to riots, basically pogroms, which are massacres, and the expulsions of Jews from England in the next reign of Edward I. But this is a slippery slope. A lot more kings and some queens across Europe start implementing these anti-Jewish laws that end up leading to the mass migration of people of Jewish faith to the east. And they end up in the Palace settlement, which is now modern-day Poland and Slovakia and Ukraine, which become part of the Russian Empire. And that leads to some very disastrous consequences for the millions of Jews living in Eastern Europe in the Second World War, which we all know about. But the slippery slope starts here. But because they're paying higher taxes, the Treasury is getting higher income. It's important. 1259, there's finally peace with France and England retains Gascony. So there's some mitigating circumstance here. Some of the nobles are kept a bit happier. They've got some more lands in France to get income from and build castles and have estates. However, the discontent continues to rise. Henry III continues to rule with favourites rather than with the aid of Parliament. And Simon de Montfort, who is one of the key nobles, Earl of Leicester, rises up. 1264, Second Barons' War. Now, this is a very, very bloody conflict. It lasts 3 years. England is now at civil war again. So we've not learnt the lessons of the First Barons' War when he's a child, and the same issues with who should be in charge of the country and how much power the king should have, how much power Parliament should have, and who should be in charge of what rears its ugly head. And Simon de Montfort is the key leader of the rebels. But it doesn't start well for the rebels in 1264. They lose the Battle of Northampton. It's a royalist victory. However, later that year, the Battle of Lewes, very important. Firstly, for Prince Edward, who will become Edward I, nicknamed Longshanks, and Henry III, they are defeated and captured. This is a big moment, and the rebels feel that they can force their demands upon the king to re-sign like a Magna Carta, another major charter. However, Edward escapes from Lincoln Castle. He's a very cheeky, slimy, cheeky little prince there, and he manages to get away. He raises more royalist forces and in the following year defeats 2 key victories, the rebels at Kenilworth, solely by himself, which is, he becomes a warrior king in his own right, and then at the Battle of Evesham, he and his father defeat de Montfort and kill him. Now, Simon de Montfort has a younger son. He is still part of the rebels. They escape and they get defeated at Chesterfield the following year. So now the rebels are getting battered all over the place, and finally the last rebel holdout at Ely in Cambridgeshire, in the marshes near the Wash, finally surrender at the near the old abbey at Ely. They surrender. They've given up, and finally the kingdom is at peace. For the next 5 years, there's not a lot going on. Westminster Abbey is still being rebuilt, and then he decides to snuff it. In 1272, Henry III dies. However, Edward I is actually on crusade for the next 2 years and doesn't return until 1274. So the kingdom is again in the charge of regency and the Parliament. Now, his 5 children are very, very important. 3 of them are exceptionally important. Obviously, Edward becomes Edward I, future King of England, and of course he'll fight wars against Wales and Scotland. Margaret, actually, ironically, becomes the Queen of Scots, so Edward will be fighting his sister and his brother-in-law, and Beatrice becomes the future Countess of Richmond. Edmund Crouchback, his second son, he's also crucial. Henry III tried to get him crowned King of Sicily, and also involved with the Holy Roman Empire. he unfortunately doesn't have the same future as Edward I. He is important in English history, and we can do a video on lesser nobles like Edmund Crouchback, and he has a daughter called Catherine. But his three eldest children have great importance in English and British history going forward. And of course, he's a member of the House of Plantagenet. So there we go. There is a look at the reign of Henry III. I haven't covered every single event in his reign because we could be here for hours, because 56 years to cover on a video is long, but 2 Barons' Wars and multiple invasions of France, mixed results on the battlefield. Not the best warrior king, although his son is a far better warrior king, but one of the most dominating kings for length of reign, and some real key things come out of his reign. What we call as a modern parliament today at Westminster really starts taking hold during his reign, and king's power over parliament's power. These battles will continue further down the line, but at the moment, the royal household, still has the advantage over Parliament, but how much longer will that last? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. It's been a while since I've done one of these videos. I really appreciate it. And I'll have some more videos for you on this channel very, very soon.